Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Skype sessions. My name is David, and my son did not sleep well last night, so I literally ordered the biggest coffee I could from the coffee shop down the street. Today, we have a guest who will be speaking at the upcoming festival in Michigan. This has been on my radar for, I would say, about 2 years, and in the run-up to it, every time I always let Matt know that it's happening, and then after it, I ask him if he went, and he asks, what festival? So I thought I would make it absolutely concrete by interviewing somebody who's going to be speaking at that festival, Sarah Arthur. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's fun to be with you.
Well, you're going to be speaking at this C.S. Lewis Festival in Michigan. But before we talk about that, would you mind just introducing yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So, Sarah Arthur. I am an author. I've written a bunch of nonfiction books that look at the intersection of faith and great literature. So I've written books for teenagers about Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I wrote a book for girls about dating, and it was based on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and then have done some books for grown-ups that are anthologies of readings for the church year that are not nonfiction readings. It's classic and contemporary fiction and poetry readings from authors all over the world. So I've done just a variety of things and making the turn to fiction soon, which is really exciting because that's my first love.
Lovely stuff. I've got to admit, I'm kind of interested to know what dating advice you pull from Pride and Prejudice. And
what wouldn't I pull from Pride and Prejudice?
Well, it's like, which characters do you feel sympathetic to? Because I've always got a soft spot for Mr. Collins. I mean, he's terrible, but I think he gets mistreated quite a lot.
He was definitely misguided. It was all in earnest. Yeah.
I mean, how many people do you know that spend their time preparing compliments in advance? I mean, that's thoughtful, conscientious. Who wouldn't want to marry such a man?
And he should have married Mary Bennett. I mean, ultimately, like, he would have had just a fan club following him around. Poor guy. Yeah.
Well, that's your background. Where did Lewis fit in? What places he had both personally and professionally?
Yeah, well, my father is a retired Presbyterian minister, and one of my favorite things that he did with us when I was a kid is he would read books aloud to us. And one of my first memories of that, we were at a frigid cabin in along the St. Lawrence River in northern New York State. The heat had not been turned on, and so he was like, all right. So my sister and I and my mom and dad just sort of like curled up under all these blankets, and he started reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to us. And that was it. Like, I was hooked. I read the series multiple times, as a child. Although I will say I would get as far as the last battle, and I couldn't get past like the first 2 chapters of that. And I think it's because when you introduced, Tyrion is like the last king of Narnia, I was like, nope. I don't want it to end. Nope. I'd close it, and I don't think I read that till later in high school. But that really prompted, I would say, my dad even used that book in our confirmation class, right? When I was in 7th grade. There's so much of his writing that has formed me theologically, formed my imagination, formed my understanding of the deep and abiding joy at the heart of the universe, which I would argue we don't find in much other literature, except for maybe Tolkien and other authors of faith, right? So that's been I think part of my quest is to not only engage literature, like to keep finding literature like that, but to be myself a writer who brings forth that kind of writing for others, that nurtures the imagination, both theologically and just imaginatively.
The wallpaper that I actually have on my phone is a quotation from Lewis when he says, I think we sin by needlessly disobeying the apostolic injunction to rejoice.
Yes.
Just as much any other sin.
Yeah.
And I have that on my phone. So every time I come to it, I'm reminded that, as he said, as Paul says to the Philippians, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say
Yes.
rejoice,
Yeah.
and about
And
that is an
it's kind of,
injunction.
it's the, I love his ways of talking about joy, because he's trying to capture something really elusive that is so close to tears, right? It's this, um, it's deeper than happiness. And I see it all throughout the Chronicles of Narnia and his writing. And how do you get that? I mean, like he's really put his finger on something powerful for all of
Mm-hmm.
us. Um, and that's just been my quest ever since. And also hope, right? So Catherine Patterson's another author I love. She wrote Bridge to Terabithia, and she talks about,
Mm-hmm.
I heard her give a talk at Wheaton College actually, where she said, I want to be a spy for hope. And I was like, that's it right there. Like every book of hers, you could summarize with that. I feel like Lewis, his motto would be, I want to be a spy for joy.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
That's the next t-shirt, right? We'll just put it on all of your mugs. Spies for joy. All the pints we drink out of it. Mine's coffee also this morning.
Well, sometimes it's necessary. I always describe it as having tea in the morning is like having somebody just gently stroke your hair while you're waking up. It's very pleasant. It doesn't get the job done super quick, but it's very nice. Whereas with coffee, it's just like a slap across the face.
Yep. And run. Go. Yep, exactly.
But let's talk about this Michigan Festival. What can you tell us about it, and what are you going to be talking about there?
Oh, well, lucky you. I was actually one of the co-founders of this festival. Because, you're asking the right person, in other words. So 20 years ago, it's the 20th anniversary of this festival in the Petoskey area of northern Michigan. My husband and I were living in Petoskey at the time, and we were both working at one of the churches there, and one of the larger churches that was kind of part of sort of cultural and learning life in the town of 7,000 people, teeny little town. But it's in a resort community right on Little Traverse Bay of Lake Michigan. And this guy came in and met with my husband, and he had just done a documentary. He was a producer of a documentary called The Magic Never Ends. And it was about C.S. Lewis, and it aired nationally on various PBS channels. It had been written and directed by and filmed by Chip Duncan of Duncan Entertainment Group. But this guy was David Krause, and he had recently moved to Petoskey, and he was like, I'm just wondering if you guys might want to do a screening, of this new documentary. And Tom was like, my husband's like, go big or go home. So he's like, how about a festival? Right. And David was like, what? So before long, we had the Arts Council was involved. Numerous churches were involved. The schools were involved. Fifth graders, all reading The Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe and doing writing prompts. Within a few years, we had the libraries, and it was crazy. Restaurants getting on board. Their entire menus would change during the festival season, and you could get like Mr. Tumnus's, pint of whatever. And Beard's Brewery in Petoskey would like actually have like a legitimate like alcoholic drink that was specific to the festival. So it's a resort town. It's used to, bringing in people all the time, but this is so specific and so weird because Lewis never came to northern Michigan. He never, as far as we know, besides going to Greece and the front line in France, like never went anywhere besides England and Ireland. Right? I mean, like,
yeah. Oh no, totally.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if Turkish Delight executives would just at the end of the month just looking at the numbers, like, what happened in Michigan?
What is happening?
Turkish Delight sales just went through the roof.
Exactly. We don't know why. But we did have Turkish Delight at our first like end of the month festival party, which was really fun because most of us were like, "Wow, this is really not yummy at all."
See, I'm a fan, but I do enjoy introducing people to Turkish Delight and just see their disappointment.
I'm not sure about this stuff. Whatever it is, just don't sneeze because all that powdered sugar. Woo. So it was just a party, and like every month in November-ish, October-ish, the whole town would get involved, and we had a tagline to Narnia and the North, of course. because literally, like, you go any further north and you end up in Canada. So yeah, and it was crazy. Shortly thereafter, I started publishing books for teens, Walking with Frodo, and then I did Walking Through the Wardrobe. So we were just had a lot of fun. I mean, even if we decided that even if just the three of us showed up, it'd be fun. But then we were bringing in, I mean, we had Doug Gresham at one point. We've had Philip Yancey, and this year's Ann Boskamp is our keynote, and she and I and Carolyn Curtis will be talking about Lewis and women.
Mm-hmm. And we've had Carolyn on the show to talk about that book. And
Yes.
I actually I've got a copy of the book, and I'm just ticking off each of the people just to make sure that we've had everybody that she pulled into that book.
Yeah.
It's like, this is just basically, she wrote me a guest list.
She really did. She really did. I have been very excited to meet her and Anne. And it will be September
17th.
Yeah, it's like that weekend, 15, 16, 17, 18. So lots of fun stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. And what will you specifically be talking about?
I always choose a controversial topic because I like to do that. And even more so after getting a master's in theological studies at Duke University Divinity School, because now I feel like I actually have the chops to like carry an argument. Whereas before I was just like, here's what I'm thinking about. So now I'm like, listen up, people. So my topic is Not Today, Jack, How to Argue with Your Favorite Dead Author. I think that's the title. I could be making that up, but no, it's something like that. I love Lewis.
How to argue lovingly with your favorite.
Lovingly. That's what it was. How to argue lovingly with your favorite parenthetical dead author. Because of course he's not around anymore. Right. So, if we did want to argue with Lewis, like, first of all, you better be ready. Secondly, he's not here. So you can sort of like yell at the wall, but not get anywhere. But with Lewis, like I said, he shaped so much of my theology and my imagination and even my writing, like the way I write and what I like to write about. But, the more I've been married 25 years. And so when I engage in Mere Christianity, his ideas about marriage, I'm like, no. So then, we always joke that I married a feminist. And he, my husband is the one who taught me how to stand up for myself, if you will. But it's really amazing. Like it's okay to argue, right? Like lovingly. And at the end of the day, you can still be like, let's go get a pint and have, we can still be friends. And I love that about the C.S. Lewis Festival because it's, there's all stripes of people. One of my favorite people to speak alongside of there was Jewish, and so it's, I'm going to be just kind of digging into those spaces where, like, how do we do this? How do we argue lovingly without canceling people on the one hand, or just like embracing absolutely everything they say as gospel because they're not God, right? Like they're going to make mistakes and their ideas will be flawed and so will mine. So how do we do that? And I'm not sure I have answers yet, but that's why I'm giving this talk to explore.
To spend some dedicated time thinking about it.
Yeah.
My wife and I recently spoke at the G.K. Chesterton Festival in Milwaukee, and people were saying, well, what are you going to talk about? And it's like, I don't know. I'm really excited. I don't know what I'm going to say.
I don't know what. Yeah. I mean, I have my ideas. I did write a paper at Duke for a C.S. Lewis class on women and Lewis, and it was really interesting because, like, my professor was Catholic, so his whole approach might not have been my approach, but he gave me the floor and was like, present your paper. Let's talk about this. So, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's a lost art to argue lovingly. And more than anything, I just want to press in there, regardless of what we disagree about, right? Like, what is it to honor the dignity of the person that you don't worship?
Yeah, and I think that what you disagree about will change from person to person. So I will actually happily defend an awful lot of the things that a lot of people don't like Lewis for. I might express some of the things that he says a little differently, but no, I'm fine with this, and this, but I'll take issue with that, and that. And we actually had an ecumenical month this season where we spoke to a Presbyterian, a Baptist, an Orthodox Jew, a Mormon. And one of the great things about Lewis is that he wasn't very polemic, which means that everybody loves him. But at the same time, the people that love him are inevitably going to disagree with things that he said. I said in the run-up to it, and you've confirmed it yet again, I keep coming across Presbyterians who love C.S. Lewis. But he spoke specifically against some of the points of Calvinism. And how does that happen? How is it that he can engender love in people, yet on some very key doctrinal points, there's going to be disagreement? But that's the gift of Lewis, that he manages to do that. And he very often gives us new language to talk about the same issues. And it's language that is free of all the various connotations from arguments that we've had in Christian circles since the Reformation and even before sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and he's also so deeply well read in ancient theologians and thinkers. So, I mean, I'm thinking about my introduction to that I had to read in divinity school of Athanasius' On the Incarnation. The introduction was written by Lewis. And I remember sitting in class and being like, whoa, hey, there's like 120 people. There's like, why is this girl shrieking with excitement? But, you know, this was Lewis was not only sort of translating into his time new ways of thinking about doctrine, but he was also sort of mining the depths and the richness of our theological history and saying, okay, so we've all forgotten Athanasius, all right? And like the super controversial idea of divinization, right? Like and yet he says it in such a way that it's not offensive. He's like that you know, Jesus became human, so the divine became human so that humans could touch the divine, right? And even for Athanasius, it's like that we become divine, which is just a crazy, like, no Presbyterian's gonna be like, what? No. So, but this is a beautiful idea that Jesus could touch a sinful world and not only not be tarnished by it, but infuse that world with his divine goodness,
life,
purity, perfection, love. You know, I mean, beauty, like it's like the golden apple that hangs out with all these other apples, and instead of getting tarnished by them, is like, this is it. Here you go. You're whole now, healed. What an incredible thought. And it's been lost in so much of our conversations that it's the incarnation itself that saves us, not just the death of Jesus, right? Powerful.
And I went to an Eastern church, a Byzantine Catholic church. So theosis is my bread and butter. That's how you look at everything. And I had read Mere Christianity prior, and then when I read it again after I've been going for a few years, and I'm in book 4, and it's like, wait, he's talking about theosis.
Oh, theosis,
but he's just using it.
And the kenotic hymn that Jesus pouring out is not a diminishing of who he is. And so I get this sense in the Weight of Glory too, this idea that our pouring out of love and compassion for one another does not diminish us. When we empty ourselves on behalf of others, we're not diminished by that. That's just his huge generosity, right? To infuse his writing with stuff that enriches our own theology, even now. Yeah.
And as I said, he reintroduces concepts under a different language so that people that would have previously have balked at a different articulation can suddenly see, oh, maybe he has a point here. But also at the same time, he can say something and go, that doesn't seem quite right to me.
I think it's like, I wish that he had taken all of that incredible strength of thought and that generosity of spirit and aimed it at women.
I would defend that. I think he did, and you see a very clear trajectory over the course of his
I
life.
wish I could say that. I think over time he did, particularly later as he
Hmm.
was married to Joy, especially. I think she changed a lot about him. And
And
I
he
think
even thought that his best book was one where he's writing from the point of view of a woman.
of a woman, absolutely. And so we see that change and transition in him. But I also, there's some block there. It's like Tolkien getting so frustrated with him about Catholicism, right? Like he's just an Ulster Irishman. Like I can't get him to come all the way to Rome. Um, but Lewis is gonna be Lewis, right?
Hmm.
I just wish that I want to rewrite Perelandra. Um,
Huh. Oh, see that's actually
because
one that I
when
don't
he
typically hear.
encounters when he encounters her, when he encounters the
Uh-huh.
Eve of that world, she is such an alien creature, and he's so struck by her alienness, and she's so different. But then when she meets the Adam of that world, when he meets the Adam of that world, he recognizes him because in him he sees the mark of the Creator upon him. And I'm just like, whoa, hold up, okay, back up. She too is made in the image
Hmm.
of this Creator, right? So she should have felt familiar. She should have seemed, familiar to him. So those are just moments where I want him to push a little bit and rethink whatever he's kind of gained from the world he was in and say, okay, well, let's go back and let's go forward and not leave Susan in the dust because she liked lipstick.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Uh, and in defense of Lewis and Paralandra, what man hasn't met a woman and gone, I don't understand her.
I don't
What is
understand.
this
Well, and
strange
vice
alien
versa,
thing?
right? And vice versa. Yeah. It's so interesting because it's like you want your narrator to be omniscient, right? That they can see their own blinders. But I feel like that's a
Hmm.
moment where Lewis doesn't see his own blinders. Yeah. So,
But not only is Lewis on a journey, I would also say Ransom is on a journey. The Ransom that we
yeah.
meet at the beginning of Out of the Silent Planet is very different from the one that we've got by the end of That Hideous Strength.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that hideous strength, we could talk about that too. In terms of that couple, she finds her fulfillment not in finishing her degree, but in becoming a better wife and mother. And okay, but can she have all of that? Like, why can't she? Why can't she?
I, see, I don't see it as exclusionary. Like it's not is one or the other. And particularly when you
Mm-hmm.
look at, we're going to commit a little bit of the personal heresy here and look at Lewis's own life. When you read what he wrote about his own wife, that he wouldn't talk tosh to her unless it was just for the fun of her just like cutting it down.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
here was a woman that was wife, mother, could go toe to toe with him on pretty much anything.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Late in
so
life.
I think that's
I'm glad
also
she didn't show up earlier.
well, yeah. With this season, we've gone through the Four Loves, and a refrain that we've said again and again is like, what would this book have looked like if you'd written it again in like another 5 or 10 years? Oh, if he'd had
Mm-hmm.
that much more time in marriage under his belt,
Mm-hmm.
how would have his Eros chapter changed? How would have his Agape chapter changed? Um,
Mm.
but unfortunately, that's we can only guess at what that would have been like.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and to I don't want to discount his generosity, right? So he's still
Mhm.
in his home, housing, uh, in a way, a displaced mom and her daughter for years upon years. He's welcoming this other mother with her two boys into his life. So he's playing. He understands that he has the opportunity to be present to people in ways that are supportive and life changing for them. Um, and so it's kind of interesting. It's like Lewis on paper and Lewis on the ground, right, are not
Mm.
always in sync. Like I think he understands in person things are different than whatever his sort of you know how whatever worldview he's built about the hierarchy of
Mm-hmm.
things. So it's
And
interesting.
also what is changing in his life and how it's starting to filter through.
Right.
into his writing.
Right. Like,
Well,
wow, this woman will play Scrabble with me on 2 boards in any language, any word in any language is fair game, as long as you can find that word in a book in the house. Latin, Greek, Elvish. Two boards of Scrabble with joy. Not one.
Yeah. No, I think it would have been very interesting had he met her earlier, or had they both managed to live longer, because Owen Barfield didn't die that long ago.
Right. Was he 99 or something?
It would have been possible, had both of them not been quite ill.
Or
well, this has been fun.
Destroying your liver does kind of shorten things on the lifespan list.
True. Didn't help. Well, also, to be fair, getting shrapnel in France also doesn't help.
Yeah, like an entire generation that, hey, we made it to 60. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, this has been fun, and I've enjoyed just gently pushing back on some of it. I also think that Lewis sometimes gets shorter shrift than he deserves. But to wrap up, do you have any other upcoming projects that you'd like to talk about?
I do. I am working on my first young adult novel. It's called Once a Queen. Kind of tells you everything you need to know about my tribute to actually all the fairy tale writers that I've ever loved. You'll see a little E. Nesbit in there, hints of Tolkien. But yeah, that should be coming out next year. The first of a 3-book series from Waterbrook, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And it's my first love to write fiction. So I'm pretty excited about it.
And you've done work with Madeleine L'Engle's stuff.
Yes.
Now, I only recently discovered her. I watched the documentary The Science Fiction Makers, and she was the final person that was examined. And I mentioned to my wife, it's like, oh, it just seems kind of cool. I've never read any of her. And she literally disappeared and then came back with A Wrinkle in Time and made me sit down and read it straight away.
Yeah. I like your wife already. Yeah. So Madeleine L'Engle is, I'm doing the Madeleine L'Engle writing retreat with my friend Sophronia Scott in Connecticut next month, the end of September, after the Lewis Festival. And Madeleine's granddaughter Lena is one of our facilitators at Wisdom House in Litchfield, Connecticut, right down the road from Crosswicks, which was Madeleine's farmhouse. And it's underwritten in part by MadeleineL'Engle.com, and we're pretty excited. Yeah, and probably more L'Engle writing retreat stuff coming up.
I interviewed Abigail Santamaria about her biography of Joy Davidman.
Yes.
And at the end of that, she mentioned that she's doing one now on Madeleine.
She is, and she just got a huge grant to keep working on it. So that's marvelous. Or a fellowship or something. Whatever she got is good news for all of us, because she's a phenomenal biographer.
Well, as my son shrieks in the background, it's clearly time that he's going down for a nap. I want to thank you again for coming on the show.
I'm glad it was you and not one of my kids. Dunk, 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 mommy.
Well, viewers, please join us again next time when we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.